So let us begin. Tonight is Gimel Cheshvan, right? Gimel Mar Cheshvan, which is the yard site of Chacham Ovadia. So we'll talk briefly about Chacham Ovadia. He was born in what year? 1920. He was born in 1920. Right? And he passed away in 2013. So he was a little bit less than 100 years old. 93 years old. He's about 93 years old at his passing. Um, Now, why? So his parents, and we know his parents called him Ovadia Yosef. That was the two names that they gave him. Why did they give him those two names? So they were naming him after two of the greatest Iraqi rabbis that were prior to him, who were Ovadia Somech, right, was the teacher of the Ben Ish Chai, and then the Ben Ish Chai himself, who was known as Rabbi Yosef Haim. So they gave him the name Ovadia Yosef. That was what he was named after. So you can take over here. His last name is not Yosef. His last name is, now it became Yosef family, because now they all took it as their last name. But that was his second name. His two names, Ovadia Yosef. His familia, his real family, I don't remember the name, but it was a different name. It wasn't Yosef. Now they all became everyone became known as the Yosef, but that's his name. His given name was Avad Yosef, named after Avad Yosomech, right? And the Ben Ish Chai, Yosef Haim. So it became Avadia Yosef. That's what he's named after. The Ben Ish Chai passed away in the early 1900s, the beginning of the 19th century, the 20th century. Yeah. Someone say something? Okay. So right now he comes to Eretz Yisrael. He's learning in which yeshiva? Yeah, the big Sephardi yeshiva. What was the name of it? Porat Yosef. Porat Yosef is really the only Sephardi yeshiva around at that time. Who came up with the idea to make yeshivat Porat Yosef?
I was there when Rabbi Atiyah.
Who came up with the idea to make the yeshiva? Rabbi Atiyah was the Rosh Yeshiva. You saw Rabbi Atiyah?
No. But I remember.
Say who was it?
Ben Ish Chai?
It was the Ben Ish Chai's brainchild. The Ben Ish Chai had a student by the name of Yosef Abraham Shalom. He moved to Calcutta, India, and he became a very, very rich man there. And so Chacham Yosef Haim, the Ben Ish Chai, asked him to give money to the yeshiva and to make, because there was like two small yeshivot and a couple of Sephardi kolelim in Eretz Yisrael. There was no big central yeshiva, so he asked him to go and put together this yeshiva. And the guy didn't. He died early, and the money that he promised didn't come through. But other people helped out, and it was completed in 1923. The yeshiva Porat Yosef was established in that time. So Chacham Ovadia came to learn in that yeshiva. Now, who was the biggest Rosh Yeshiva at the time when Chacham Ovadia came there? In fact, all Sephardic Jewry today can really be traced back to this Rosh Yeshiva. This was Rabbi Ezra Atiyah, who himself was a Syrian Jew. He was born in Aleppo.
My grandfather used to go there.
Learn by
My
him.
grandfather was one street away from
Wow.
Yeshivat Porat Yosef.
One street away from Yeshivat Porat Yosef.
As a child, 10 years old, when I used to go over there.
So that was the yeshiva, and he was learning there
in the 70s.
Now there's a famous story that Chacham Ovadia, I think he was 10, 11 years old, and his father, Rabbi Yaakov, needed some help in the store. He couldn't run the store by himself.
Right.
So he took Ovadia, his son, and said, "You can help me in the store." And stop sending him to yeshiva. He said, "I need help in the store. It's very hard to make money. I need someone to help."
Yeah, everybody was poor.
He was very poor. Yeah, everybody was very poor at the time. That's the way it was. So he missed a day or two, and all of a sudden, Chacham Ezra Atiyah and Rabbi Ephraim Kohen,
he told the father,
they come to the grocery store.
I'll work.
They say, "Where's Chacham Ovadia? Where's Ovadia?" He says, he's here helping me. He says, but his future is in Torah. He says, what can I do? I need money. I can't send him. What do you want from me? So Rabbi Ezra said, you know what? I have an idea. He goes, he puts on the apron, and he starts working in the store. And you can imagine Rabbi Yaakov was like, no, you can't do this. You can't do this. And so he promised, you know what? I'll send him back to yeshiva. But the story continues, actually, that the yeshivas would usually finish mid-afternoon before it got dark. It was very dangerous to walk home during those times. And so Chamavadi would come home early in the mid-afternoon. And when he came home, his father still brought him to the store. And people knew that Chamavadi liked to learn a lot. So some people on the streets, they used to come by the store and they would see how he got so engrossed in the book that they would come in and steal stuff from the grocery store because they knew that he wasn't paying attention. And says his brother, he had a brother, Chamavadi had a brother of Naim. He said that my father, he said, Rav Yaakov realized how much merchandise they were losing. He got so frustrated that he told Ovadia, you're not going to be a grocer anymore. I don't need you here. Just go and sit and learn. Rabbi Naim writes, he says, I was always convinced that those were no ordinary thieves, but rather they were angels dressed up as thieves to make sure that Chamavadia could go back and learn without having anything bothering him. The story goes, Chamavadia was, when he was chief rabbi, he would visit some of the prisons in Eretz Yisrael. And during one such a visit, a prisoner told him that he was one of the thieves that used to steal from him while he was watching the store. And Chamavadia forgave him wholeheartedly and explained to him how he should go about doing tshuva. So that's a famous story that people know. What's interesting, more interesting story I saw, and I think we mentioned it a few times. There's an interesting story that who shared this? Rav Yosef Yashiv. Rav Yashiv would share a story about Chamavadia. Chamavadia had so much yirat shemayim. He says once he was walking home from yeshiva as a young boy, as a young married man, and a group of students from the yeshiva, but they wanted to play a joke on him. They were going to do a prank. To Chamavadia. So they came over to him and they told him, listen, we're experts at looking at clothing and realizing if clothing have shatnez or not. We've trained in that. And we're looking at your suit, and your suit is shatnez. They're playing a joke on him. And all of a sudden, they see him. He started to take off, he threw off his jacket. He started to take off his pants in the middle of the street. You can't wear shatnez. As they see that, they saw the joke went too far. So they tell him, no, we were just playing around. He's like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that now you're saying you're playing around. I believe you the first time. And they had to convince him that they were just playing around and that he wasn't wearing shatnez. Some of his greatness, we know that he was very diligent in learning Torah. We know that he was a master in Torah, in Psak. We know that when he started giving shiurim, he started to give a shir in the yeshiva in the shul where Rav Kaduri was the Rav there. And when Chamavadia was teaching the shir, he was using the Ben Ish Chai Sefer. And as he was reaching the Ben Ish Chai Sefer, he was going through the Sefer, and he's going through a Kama Halachot, and he says, but you should know, we don't pass him like the Ben Ish Chai. Because the Maram Bet Yosef says like this. And Rav Kaduri came over to him and said, listen, if you continue this way, we're not going to let you speak here. All right? Because we're from Iraqi descent. Right. And we followed the Ben Ish Chai. You can't speak like this. So he went to Rosh Yeshiva Ezra and told, what should I do? Ezra said, no, you continue to teach the way you're teaching. And eventually he got fired from that shul. And after what happened then, he got the Persians. The Persians took him. The Persians took him in, and he started giving shiurim, and his famous shiurim came out of that shul. And obviously, Chamavadia became a legend from his way of learning and his way of psak. Now, some stories that they share about Chamavadia. They say that he delivered a class on the weekly parasha on Friday nights at the Porat Yosef Yeshiva in the Geula neighborhood. On that street, there was a young man who used to drive a very noisy motorcycle. And on Shabbat mornings, he would take advantage of no traffic in the streets, and he would ride up and down in his motorcycle. And everybody would come out, screaming at him, yelling at him, trying. One Friday evening, This motorcyclist was going past Parat Yosef, and he sees through the window that it's filled to capacity. It's filled. Everybody's there. The whole Beit Midrash is there Friday night. So he's thinking it's a party. He's thinking it's a party. So he stops his motorcycle and asks the boys what's going on in there. Some boys were outside. So they say, go in and look for yourself. He goes inside. Story is, he goes inside and he hears Hamovadia in the middle of saying a story. So he takes a seat. He sits down. He listens and he stays for the whole year. And he turns to the people as he's leaving. He says, does this happen every night? They said, no, it happens every Friday night. So he started to come every Friday night, 7:30. He was in the shul. He used to come first, sit in the front. And without his motorcycle, he stopped driving the motorcycle. Eventually, he found his talit. He started to go to the shul on Shabbat mornings. And eventually changed himself around. Ended up marrying a religious woman and started a Torah-observant family. What happened? He just heard Chamavadia's shiurim, a little bit of the stories, and Chavad never told him keep Shabbat, stuff like that. But he got influenced. Another famous story. Chamavadia didn't just teach; they say when he could have a direct influence, he had direct influence as well. One Motzei Shabbat, as he's leaving the weekly lecture from the Tiferet Yerushalayim shul, Chamavadi was coming down the stairs and he was stopped by a man who was new to religion. He's about tshuva. He kissed the rabbi's hand and he says to the rabbi, I would like if the rabbi can please write a few words to my wife, writing that it is asur to have a TV in the house. So he says, we're arguing over it and it's making shalom bayit problems. If the rabbi can write it, I believe my wife would be respectful and she would listen. So Chamavadi said, I can do you one better. I'm going to walk home with you and we're going to talk to your wife. He says, you don't have to come to my house. Just one letter is enough. Just write it. He says, no, I'm coming. And so Motzei Shabbat, the rabbi Chamavadi comes to his house. He lived in Ramot. Well, it's a travel, right? Yeah, sure. He said, let's go. This man calls his wife, tells his wife that the Chamavadi is coming to the house. She was surprised at the late hour. Chamavadi is there. And he comes, he talks to them. He talks to them about the Kedushat of the Jewish home and how, please, have mercy on yourself and on your children and on your husband and get rid of it. She began to cry. She says, in quote, if the rabbi came to our home at such a late hour, it must be very important. I'll get rid of it right away, first thing in the morning. Chamavadi says, nah, we don't have to wait till the morning. No. Let's do it now. So the husband and Chamavadia's gabbai, they carried the television down from the third floor to the dumpster. And Chamavadia was following them. As they were going down, they accidentally bumped the TV into the wall. So the guy said, careful. Chamavadia laughed. He said, it's okay. You should hit it twice. It's throw it out. And he went and he saved the Jewish family. Another famous story is the story of a young boy, a troubled son of older, inattentive Holocaust survivors. And the boy was playing on the street on Shabbat, and he was playing with the ball, right? And he kicked the ball too hard, and it flew near the synagogue, and just as Chamavadi walks out of the shul, it hits his hat and flies off. So Chamavadi comes to pick up his hat, and the boys are laughing at him. These boys are playing outside. Chamavadi turns to the boy and says, Shabbat Shalom. And the guy says, what do you want from me? Chamavadi said, I just want to know where your parents are. He says, my parents, they're dead. Chamavadi says, if you want, you can come to my house. If you want a meal, you can eat with me. So the boy said, okay. He came. Chamavadi made kiddush, gave him to eat. The Chamavadi says, would you like to sleep now? He said, sure. He slept the whole Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat, Chamavadi says, what would you like to do now? The boy says, I would like to go to the movies. He says, okay, how much money you need? He says, a few whatever, how much it costs. Yeah. Chamavadi gave him the money. Oh. So he goes to the movies. The next Shabbat, same thing. He comes for food. Motzei Shabbat, he asks for money for the movies. And he goes like this week after week. So finally, he decides to say, as the rabbi is being nice to me, I can't continue to do these things. He starts to change his life. The boy says, over time I discovered I wasn't the only kid. Chamuvadi had 12 boys like me coming in every single week to his house. And he was taking care of us. He taught me about tefillin. He would sit and teach me. And eventually, he says, this boy, eventually I became a rabbi and ultimately a dayan. I worked for 25 years. Chamuvadi, he did everything for me. He married me off, came to my wedding, children's wedding, was sandak, and everything like that. So Chamuvadi was hands-on in Kiluv. They didn't bring his name.
No, because I have somebody from my class.
Yeah.
My class, he was a Talmud of Chacham Ovadia, and he became Rav, a big Rav, and Gidon, what is Gidon Ben, he's really very, very well known.
Wow.
Yeah.
Chamuvadi was a very big, influential. We'll have one more story here. Two more stories. We'll end with this. There was when Maran was chief rabbi, there was a beautiful mikvah that was built in Neve Yaakov, in a recently reestablished neighborhood in northeast Jerusalem. After it was open, the attendant of the mikvah calls the rabbinical council, and she says, "I'm here now a few nights, and not one single person came to the mikvah." Mm-hmm. So Rabbi Zolti, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem at the time, he comes to Chamuvadia's office, and he says to him, "I'm to blame for this. We are to blame for this. There are Jews in Jerusalem that don't go to mikvah." And he said, so Chamuvadi said, "What do you want to do?" He says, "Let's go from door to door and knock on the doors and teach the people about the importance of mikvah." Chamuvadi says he was not comfortable with it, but Rabbi Zolti insisted, and he went. And he said, "We went from door to door and we told each of them, every Jew is righteous. Each soul has a spark of holiness. We spoke gently. We told them we want you to be happy and to get a lot of shefa and bracha. And that's why we ask you to keep this mitzvot." They say the attendant calls, and she calls back and she says to Rabbi Zolti, she says, right after we had 50 people the next night after that, 60 people came, and Baruch Hashem, that mikvah got very busy as people started to keep Tahat Mishpacha. And end off the section with the Tanat Eliyahu. Tanat Eliyahu that Chamuvadi was very fond of repeating. He says, after 120 years, says Tanat Eliyahu, never writes it, he says, God will ask, "What have you done for my honor?" So after 120 years, you're going to come to Shemaim, they're going to ask you, what did you do in the honor of Hashem? So the man will say, Ribono Shel Olam, I learned Torah. So Ribono Shel Olam will say to him, you studied Torah, so that means you enjoyed yourself. You had hana from learning Torah. But I'm asking you, what did you do for me? Learning Torah was for yourself. I'm asking you, what did you do for me? You hear this? Learning Torah is for ourselves. Hashem continues to ask, what did you do for him? Says the Tanat Eliyahu, you have to be able to answer. I stopped my Torah study for your sake, Hashem, and I went to teach others, to bring others close to you. That indeed you have done for me. Fortunate are you, and fortunate is your portion. Okay? So Hashem's going to ask you what you do. You have to be able to say, I helped somebody else keep Torah and mitzvah. That is what means honoring Hashem. Not learning Torah. Torah is for yourself, that you have to do. That's for yourself. Others, what you do is very important. We'll end off with the last story that I'd like to share. It's a famous story of Chamuvadi, and then we'll start Hilchot Shabbat. This is the story that really shows the Ruach HaKodesh of Chamuvadi. There's a story that was said, a man once came to visit Chamuvadi. And when the man came in, Chamuvadi said, wow, it smells like Gan Eden. What's the chut you have to smell like Gan Eden? Walking in. I mean, first of all, Chamuvadi knows what Gan Eden smells like. That's number one, right? And then he says to him, what mitzvah did you do? The man said, I did this, I did that, and that. And Chamuvadi says, no. That's not what's getting you Gan Eden. Tell me the truth. What is it? So the man said, send everybody else out. I don't want everyone to hear what I did. And after he sent everybody out, they left one translator. The man was English, he was American. So he tells Chamuvadi that him and his father, after the war, They went back to Poland, and they went to buy. Apparently, the Nazis turned a lot of the human flesh into soap bars, and they distributed those soap bars to the people. And they knew about this, and they wanted to give the bodies of the Jews a kvura, a burial. So they went with their own money, and they went and they bought all these soaps in order to give it kvura, in order to give it a burial. And he says, on the day that we were leaving Poland, after buying as much soap as we can, somebody came over. He says, a guy came and said, I have a box full of soap, and I want to sell it to you. So the man named his price. But this Jew says, I didn't have the money anymore. He said, I don't know where my father was, and I don't have any money. So I told this guy, give me the soap, I'll take care of it, and I'll bring you the money later. And the man said, no, money up front, right? COD, cash on delivery. So he said, this man said, I didn't know what to do. He's a young boy. He said, you know what? He said, I have woolen pants. I have wool pants. And I see you wearing cotton pants. You know what? We'll make a switch. Take my wool pants. It's very cold in Poland, you can imagine. He says, these pants will keep you warm, and I'll take your thin cotton pants. And this guy took the deal, switched the pants, took these what's it called? These soaps. He buried them, and he had to then travel all the way to Siberia to get out, whatever it was, in freezing cold, in thin cotton pants. And he said, this maybe is the mitzvah that you're smelling that you think is Gan Eden. Chamabadia heard the story. He said, this explains why your clothes smell like Gan Eden. The neshamot of all those Jews whose remains you buried were all Kiddushim. They all died al Kiddush Hashem. And therefore, they're all in Gan Eden. But not only they're all in Gan Eden, they always come back down to help you out. These neshamot have been accompanying you throughout your life. And that's why you smell like Gan Eden. So here is the Ruach HaKodesh of Chamabadia, is able to smell Gan Eden. Huge story. So I'll tell you, he didn't become Chamabadia just by sharing stories. He became Chamabadia by learning Torah. So now let us begin our journey revisiting the Malacha of Bora. So a little bit of a note is that the Tzurban Rabbanan Volume 20, which we're really up to, has not yet been published. When I spoke to Mr. Botner from the organization, he said that the material is there, but they have some financial, and they're looking for sponsors and stuff like that. So they're hoping that the Sefer will be out in a few weeks from now. They're saying in the beginning of December, it should be out. So at this point, we are going to go back to volume 18 today. So I have the books out on the table. We're going back to volume 18. Okay? So volume 18, and the last shear in volume 18 is the shear of Bora.
On the page?
Page 291. Okay? So this time around, we're going to go into Bora a little more in depth. Okay? We're going to look through the Tzurba. We're also going to go through other Svarim. We're going to go a little more further than we did the first time when we went through the shear of Bora.
Yeah,
okay, Bora. What is Bora? So Bora is selecting, okay, which means removing. What happened? What was its, sir? What was its journey in the Mishkan? Right, because everything is to do with the Mishkan, right? The things that we can't do, the 39 malachot. So in the form of baking, right, which is also done for the dyes and stuff like that, there was a process. So just give me a second. I'm going to find you the pictures so you can all look with me. Okay. So the first thing you would do when you would have wheat. Yeah. Yes. Winnowing, sifting. Yes. So the first thing you would do was called threshing. Threshing is this picture up here. You would remove the wheat kernel. Okay. You would remove the wheat kernel from remove the husk from the wheat kernel.
From the klipa.
Okay, right. The husk breaks and the kernel is exposed. So here's the husk, and you're getting the kernel out. That is the threshing. Then came winnowing, right? Because now you had all the pieces together. So you would throw it into the air, right? And the heavy stuff would fall down. The light stuff would go. So now you have the kernels that fell down. They're the heavy ones. But now when it fell down, it also got mixed up with pebbles and sand and other stuff like that. So in order to now remove it from the pebbles and stones, whatever it is, they did what's called borer. They did selecting. Okay. After that, they would grind it, and after that, they did sifting, which is also very similar to selecting. Well, like borer, you're getting rid of the non-flour, only the flour goes through. So selecting and so you take a look and on our page in 291, he says you have the malachah of zoreh, which is winnowing, which is the throwing up part, the malacha of borer, selecting, and mirake, which is sifting, are three melachot, but they're all similar. They're the same idea of getting rid of one and taking the other, which is the same as borer. So borer, mirake, and zorah, they're all the same, is that you are selecting one from the other. So it is a malacha that you're not allowed to do on Shabbat. So how do we select, if need be, on Shabbat? So there is a Gemara. There's a Gemara on page, you see page 291, source number 1. The Gemara, Mesechet Shabbat, Ayin Dalin, Amid Aleph. Okay, so today we're going to look a little bit more into this Gemara, but let's start with what we have over here. Okay, Tanu Rabbanon, Hayu Lefanov Mine Oichlin. The guy has in front of him number of types of foods, or he has food with non-food. Okay, he has more than one item, meaning there is a mixture. Okay, you have to have a mixture in order to have a problem with borer. So, what does the Braita teach? Borer v'oicha. He can select and eat.
The good from the bad.
We don't know right now. Just says borer v'oicha.
Yeah.
Borer umeniach. He can select and place. Select and place. Okay. V'lo yivra. And he should not select. The imbira, and if he selects, chayav chatat. Then he has to bring a chatat. So the Gemara asks, "My Omar, what did you say? Nothing makes sense here. First you say you can select and eat. Then you say you can select and leave. Then you say don't select. And then you say if you selected, you have to bring a hatat. Make up your mind. Can I select and eat or I have to bring a hatat? Which one is it?
It means when you borer, put in your mouth and eat it. If you don't want to eat it,
so let's
put
see.
it down.
So skipping a few lines in the Gemara, we go to the next page on the Tzurba on 292. So we have now 3 answers. The Ritva and others understand that all 3 answers are applicable. The Rambam understands this as well. All 3. It's not just one or one out of the 3. You need all 3. But let's start off. Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, I'll tell you what the Braita means. When it says Bayer v'oichel, it means biyad. It means if I do it with my hand, that's permissible. Bayer umeniach, if I take it and I place it, also biyad, with my hand. But if I did it with a kanun uv tamchui, if I did it with a sieve or a sifter, stuff that are not usually used to select, right? Potter of a lasser. It's potter of a lasser. But if I use something that is usually used to select, okay, I mean a basket or a plate is the first one, stuff you don't usually use to select, and a sieve and a sifter, which you usually use to select, then you're hayav hatat. Okay? So Rav Yosef says, I'll tell you what the Braita means. The Braita says you can select, it means you did it with your hand. The Braita says you can select and place it for someone else to eat, that means with your hand. The Braita says you selected, you should not select, that means if you're going to use like a plate or something else that's not usually used to select things, but you're not allowed to use it. It's pater of a lasser, right? And then if you actually use an instrument that's used for selecting, then you're hayav hatat. So matkef le Rab Humnana, Rab Humnan says, where do you see in this Braita that it says anything about a basket or a plate? Doesn't say that. Braita just says don't select, don't. Doesn't talk about a basket. So why are you throwing in stuff there? Say Rab Humnana. Rab Humnana says, I'll tell you. Boyer v'oichel. You know what it means? Boyer v'oichel. It means oichel mitoich pesolet. You can take the food from the non-food, or the food that you want from the food that you don't want. Boyer meniach, boyer select and place for someone, same thing, the food from the non-food. But you're not allowed to remove the non-wanted parts from the food. That you cannot select. The imbirin, if you did that, if you took the non-food from the food, hayav hatat, then you're hayav hatat. So Abaya said, wait, where does it says in the Braita, oichel mitoch besolet? Doesn't say that. So why are you throwing in new words into the Braita? Say, Abaya. So what did Abaya say? Buyer, the oichel, when it says you can select and eat, it means the altar. It means right away. If I'm going to eat it right away, I can select right away. Ubar miniach, and I'm going to select to place also means the altar. Okay, which is a little confusing. Right. Half hour to an hour. So it seems to be that miyad doesn't mean. You usually understand the altar means right away means right away, but the lashon of the Gemara is bar umeniach means you placing it, right? It means you're leaving it there, and it's still called la'altar. So that's where the Rashba and others get that it's more than that. That immediate use is not the minute that I'm actually using it, but rather there's a time frame, which we'll go into. Ulvo bayom lo yivror. But to leave it for the day, you cannot separate. In birer, and if you took it and you separated it for later, and the Meiri and others say that means more than 60 minutes, naaseh kivorer lo otzer. Then it's as if you are putting it away or for later, and that's usher. It's not for right away. The hayav hatad and your hayav hatad. Amru rabbanon k'mei derava amr lahu shapir amar Nahmani. The sages said before Rava that Nahmani Abaya spoke very well. Now you can understand this Gemara to mean that the third pshat of Abaya is the right pshat, but the Rishonim, the Ritva, the Rambam, they don't understand the Gemara that way. They understand the Gemara that all these conditions everything are required.
Right.
Okay, and that's the way we pass in Lahalach. You need all three conditions, and we'll see the Rambam in a moment. Now, there's a Gemara here. The Gemara continues. You take a look in source number 2, and the Gemara says, "Hayol fanam shnei mini oichlin ubir ve'achol ubir ve'aniach ravashi matni potter hayerim difti matni chayiv." So the guy did barer and he ate, and one says he's potter abul otter, and one says he's chayav chatat. So which one is it? Rashi matni potter v'hatani chayiv. So like kasha, and here is when he used a sieve or a sifter. So it depends how he did it, right? If he used a sieve or a sifter, an instrument that's used for selecting, then he's chayav chatat because he did the actual malacha. If he used a plate or something else to do it, that's an isser derabana because that's not the actual way of doing it, but it's still usser because it looks too similar. It's an isser derabana. Okay, and the next piece just teaches you that again it has to be food from the non-food, and by the lupin bean, you have to cook it 7 times. And then if you don't remove it, it's going to get ruined if you don't remove it. So if I remove it, the Gemara says that you can't do, because even though it's the food, it would get ruined if it stays there. So it's considered the non-food because it could get ruined as it stays there. And therefore, you can't remove it. What you learn from there is that you can only remove food from the non-food or the non-desired food. Okay. Let's take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam is quite clear. Says the Rambam in source number 4. Habayr oichel mitoch besolet. If a person takes the food from the non-food, right? He has the mixture there of food and non-food. So he could do that. Oishel fanav shnei mine oichlin ubir min acher. And he takes it one min from the other min, but he does it with a sieve or a sifter. Okay? Right? So then he's going to be chayav chatat, because he did the actual malacha. Even if you're taking oichel mitoch besolet, you're taking the food from the non-food, but you're using an instrument that is usher. Yeah, you have to do it with your hand. And if you use the non-designated instruments, so a plate or a barrel, something you don't usually select with, so then he's potter of a loster, right? It's potter. The imbir biyadoi, but if he did it with his hand, L'ochel altar, to eat it right away, that is mutter. All right? So you have the conditions. You have to take the food from the non-food. You have to do it with your hand, and you have to eat it right away. Okay? Second piece in the Rambam, v'haboyer pisolet mitoch ha'oichel. And if you took the non-food from the food, afilu biyado, even if you did it with your hand, chayav. Even if you did it with one hand, you still chayav. Okay? You're not allowed to take the non-food from the food. It has to be the food from the non-food. That's unlike Tosfot. Tosfot, we'll see, like on Yom Tov, sometimes you have to do it the other way, whatever has less work. We'll see that when we go to Borer on Yom Tov. So this time around, we'll look at Borer on Yom Tov as well. Okay, and Borer Maseh Shabbat, we'll try to get a little more deeper this time around. We go through Borer. Okay, so that is the Rambam. Baruch Mitoch B'Soled B'Yadol Nichafil Levo Bayom Naaseh Kibar Lo Tzarchayis. It's the same thing. You take the food from the non-food and you did it with your hand, but you didn't do it for right now. You did it for later in the day. Then it's if you stored it for later and you're hayav hatat. So the Rambam is clear. You need all three conditions. And you take a look at the bottom, page 293. He summarizes the three conditions. One removes the food from the waste. Food from the waste. Okay. Number two on page 294. One does the sorting by hand. Okay. If you use a keli that's designed specifically for sorting, then you did the actual deoraita isser.
Sorting to eat, not to put it away.
Whichever way. If you're sorting with a keli, with a special design like the sieve, the sifter, those things, then you did the isser deoraita. Whereas you're using other utensils, if you just use the plate or something else, then it's an isser deoraita.
For example, you have a yachni, you have a potato, you have a carrot, you have a meat. And you want to put it away. And you're allowed to sort it. Like put the carrot separate, meat separate. With your hand, you're doing sorting away. To put it on a plate from different, you make it nice, separate, yeah. To eat it. But
well, we're gonna go through that. We're gonna go through. It's not gonna be allowed. It depends how you do it. You'll have to unsort the mixture and then you can do that. If you unsort the mixture, meaning that you spread everything out in a way that is no longer a mixture, then you'll be able to put everything as you want. The same thing with the cutlery. If you washed it and you want to put it back inside, then you got to move one out of the other, right? Can you do that? We'll talk about it. Okay. So it's a good thing that we came back to this. Good. And one sorts for immediate use. Says the Shulchan Aruch, exactly what the Rambam says. And he used a what's it called? A sieve or a sifter is chayav. To use the plate or something else, potar v'laser. Then bir b'yadai, but if he did it with his hand, altar to eat it right away, then it's mutter. If he did it for later today, not for eating right now, again, we'll see what time that is, right? Then he's going to be chayav. He is chayav. Okay, now.
You have a filter, the filter inside has liquid. So what you do, you tip out the front, and you let all the liquid out. You squeeze it. So this is called considered you are borer. When you let it out, for you can't eat it raw, so you let out all the liquid. This is number one. When you take egg, and you don't want the inside, you don't want yolk, and you just remove what you don't want. This is called the borer. What's all this?
Good questions. Very good. So we are going to define that. We're going to have to define that. We're coming to it. Now, the real question is that you have to ask yourself at this point is, Lamaisa, why isn't it considered borer when I do these three conditions? Why? Why isn't that borer? If I use my hand, it's not borer. If I do to eat it right away, it's not borer. If I taking food from the non-food, that's not considered. Why is it not considered borer? I'm still selecting. Why is that permissible? So there are two ways to learn this. Rashi on the page, when he talks about these things, he says as follows: Take Rashi says, "Loi derech breira he." It's not the way of selecting. To remove food from the non-food, that's not how you select. The light derech breira he. Okay, here's the example. It doesn't mean waste. It could be anything that you don't want to eat. For example, here's an example. I have on the Shabbat table, we made a salad, or you made a meat pizza, whatever it is. And there's onions in there. A lot of people don't like to eat onions. Yeah. Okay? So they want to remove the onions so I can eat my pizza or whatever. Well, you can't do that. You can't remove the onions because that is taking the psolit away from the ochel, and you can't do that. Okay, you have to take ochel. We talk about the only way to get around that is to say, "Who wants my onions?" And then someone would say, "Me want the onions."
And nobody wants what they do.
Oh, that's a different problem. Someone should say, "I want the onions," and the guy can take off the onions and give it to that person. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So then it's no longer psolit. Someone wants it as food. Okay. All right. So if you have daughters, that's what they're going to do. You have to know that. Just so always says, whoever they don't want, you say you want it. Let them put it on your plate. Okay. Now, so he says the and then he says he eat it right away. Says Rashi, the ochel alter she'ein zeh derech boirin. It's not the derech of doing boirer to do it immediately. Okay, that's what he says, and he says the same thing with the yad. B'yad loy dami lebar klal, says Rashi. So in all three instances, Rashi, you know why it's not considered bar? Because that's not the way you do bar. You don't do bar with your hand. You don't do bar to take the food from the non-food, and you don't do bar to do it right away. That is the way Rashi is learning. The Ramban. Now maybe the Ramban is really saying the same thing, but you can see it. The Ramban says a little bit differently. The Ramban writes that the reason it's permitted, the reason why it's not considered bora, more likely, the reason why it's permitted. Rashi said it's not considered bora. The Ramban says the reason why doing bora through these three conditions is permitted. He says selecting in this manner transforms the selecting into a typical manner of eating. It becomes a derech achila. Okay? Says the Ramban, it becomes a derech achila. It becomes a way of eating. That's the way you eat this food. By taking it with your hand, the food, for right away. It's no longer considered bor, it's rather considered derech achila. Right? What's it in the Ramban and Rashi? Rashi says that what? It's not considered bar. It is not bar. Taking it this way is not bar klal. It's not at all bar, he says. The Ramban says it is bar, but now it becomes a derech achila. Is there a nafkamina? It's not clear what the nafkamina is right at this point, but the Rabbi Rimon wants to say the nafkamina would be regarding like fish bones and stuff like that. We'll have to work it out eventually. But at this point, just wanted to give you these two ways in the Rishonim. And by the way, it's not just the Ramban himself. In fact, the Rabbeinu Chananel also says the similar thing. If you take a look at Rabbeinu Chananel on the page, we don't have it in the Tzur, but I'm just reading from the Gemara itself. On the page, Rabbeinu Chananel does say that as well. He writes that it becomes a derech achila. And unlike Rashi, who says is no longer considered bar. Okay, so it comes out the three ways, three conditions, not three ways, three conditions you have to have in order to select, and either it is no longer considered selection, or it's considered now derech achila, is it has to be done by hand, it has to be done to eat right now, and it has to be done food from the non-food item. Just to point out the way Chamuvadia would paskin, the way the Alka Joseph brings down the halacha. Interesting, he writes it as follows. I'll read it to you. page 337, and then you'll see how he's learning over here. Here he writes, Shibtanayim Ela Hadavar Nechshav Kederech Achila. It's considered Derech Achila, but then he writes, Ve'ein Zo Derech Breira. So it's not considered Breira. So perhaps you can say they're both. It's a mixture of Rambam of the Rashi and the Ramban, which is it's not Breira, but rather it's Derech Achila. Okay, we'll see. We'll go through. But that's number one. Why those three are not considered? Okay, we got to that. Now we're going to define what does it mean right away. What does it mean miyad? What does it mean I'm doing it right away? So he brings the Rabbeinu Chananel, and top of page 295. And the Rabbeinu Chananel writes, "V'la'alter da'amar Abaya calls man sheyushav al shulchan v'oichel." The whole time that he's sitting at the table and eating, that's all considered right away. Okay, so that means at this point, what we understand, the guy's in the middle of his meal, and he's going to be eating something 3 hours later during this same meal. So at the beginning of the meal, he could select, separate whatever it is the right way. For later in the meal, that's considered right away because it's in the same meal. That's what he's saying. Whole time he's sitting at the shulchan and he is eating. Says the Ramah. The Ramah says, right, Shemesiv. Ba miyad. Mikra altar is also considered to having being for immediate use.
Could be a longer time.
So
according to Rambam, Ramah could be a longer time.
Is the Ramah meaning before the Suda?
Yeah.
Right? He's saying everything that's oita Suda. Anything that's needed for that Suda, meaning like
that's a half hour before.
So wait, we don't know what exactly that means.
No, I'm saying
says the Mishnah Berurah, explaining the Ramah, Ratzar Lemer, Afili Arach Zman Suda Kamashad Mikra Altar Kivin Shahabreya, he's Samach Suda. You can do it before because it's considered Samach Suda, even if the meal is going to be long. Okay? So he went from during the meal to before the meal. As long as it's for the meal, you're allowed to do it in advance. Now, how far in advance can you do it? Okay? So there's a Rashba, there's a Meiri, there's a Mordechai, and they all say, if you're doing it for longer than an hour, that's considered not right away. Okay, so before the Suudah, you can do it. If you do it for more than an hour, that's considered not right away, and that's Asur. Has to be, so to speak, within the hour. Of Shulchan Aruch the Eglei Tal. So in Pacha Mishashal Shishim minute Chashav Kivar LaOchel Alter. So it seems to be if the hour is less than 60 minutes, meaning it's done within 60 minutes time, it's not considered for later use, it's considered for now use. And that's what they asked Rav Moshe. Is that the right way of understanding it? And said Rav Moshe Feinstein said, Ein Shah Zu Shal Shir Shah. It's not 1 hour. Ela Hazman Shader Chuli Isha Zo Shemisaderet Ta'ochel LaSuda. It's however long it takes the woman to prepare for the meal. V'koidim lazeh afil shah kitano aser. And even if it takes her a half hour to prepare, and she wants to do it 35 minutes in advance, she cannot, because now it's not considered immediate, right? It has to be whatever is the normal time for her to prepare the food. Rabbi Ribiat understands this. Now, how do you understand this, Rav Moshe? He seems to be saying that it's not an actual hour. It's the actual time that you need to use. And he uses the example the Kaidmos that feel Shaketana also, even for 1 minute more, you can't do it. So is he meaning to extend it or he's meaning to minimize it? What is Rav Moshe meaning? So Ribiat takes it as an extension. Ribiat says in source number 10, he says, take a look at the example. He writes over there, the second paragraph on source 10, page 296. If the meal requires numerous preparations, laying out a tablecloth, making place settings, peeling vegetables, chopping liver, peeling and mashing eggs, bringing wine, cold drinks to the table. All these considered part of the preparation. And all the time needed for them is considered miyat, even though many of them are not bora related, meaning you don't have to put the bora at the end of the preparation, says Rav Rubiat. If it's going to take me 2 hours to set this table for the Simudah, which could be, you have a brachot, you have something like that, you can do bora at the beginning of the 2 hours as long as you need all that time to do the preparation. That's Rabbi Rubiat. Okay? Now, Chazon Avadia, right? So Chacham Avadia, right? His yard site. We already said stories about him. So let's learn some halachot from Chacham Avadia. Let's see what he writes. It says near the lashon shalav dafka. When it says an hour that you have to do the bor beforehand, it's lav dafka. So what is this man? He says meaning that it's a short amount of time. He writes you can do it a half hour before the meal. So he's understanding that the word sha'ah doesn't mean an hour. Rather, it means a small amount of time. And lasud, no, he's not saying that. Obadiah is not saying that. He says v'davka. He's limiting the time. Whereas Rabbi Ribiat took Rabbi Moshe to understand and to extend the time, Rabbi Chamabadia is saying you don't have that. And he writes, it's only a half hour before. Right? It's only a half hour before. So if you're eating in a small suda and you don't need that half hour, and all you need is so you only can do it 5 minutes before. So Sishim is Chazon Avadia, he is limiting the time. He's saying you only got a half hour. Samach Lasuda. That's considered altar. Other than that, it is not considered Samach Lasuda. Now in the Yalkut Yosef, he writes over here that some poskim rule this means within an hour of the meal. That's using the literal of the Meiri. That got Mordechai, the Rashba will all say Sha'ah, understanding it as being the literal meaning of an hour. Okay, so there are different opinions here. What this hour means? Is it an actual hour? Is it the time, however long it takes me to prepare, and that's what the Sha'ah means? Or you have Sha'ah actually means not an hour, but rather it means a small amount of time, and at the maximum, that means a half hour. That's really the different opinions here. Okay? So, halacha l'maisa, what we tell people is that half hour for Sparadim, and if they need an hour, you have what to rely on for the hour. I think I saw that wrote down here as well. Let's just take a look 1 minute. Right over here. What? The Rishonim will bring it down to write an hour. So the question is, what does Sha'ah mean? How do you understand the word Sha'ah? So does it actually mean 60 minutes? And Rav Moshe said, no, it doesn't mean 60 minutes. It means the time you need to prepare the Suda, which Rav Ribiat took it in the sense of as much time as you need to prepare the Suda. Whereas Chamavadia seems to take it, the Shah, as being not Shah, but a small amount of time, not an actual hour, but Shah meaning small amount of time, which at a maximum would be a half hour. Fine, let me just see what I put over here. Halacha 17. Such as one has a large family, one may even begin preparing for the meal up to a half hour before the meal. The family is smaller and not much time is needed. One may begin preparing the meal for which time it takes the men to come home from the shul, which is usually less than a half hour. Right. He brings here half hour as well. But I saw in the Alkut Yosef, he wrote that a person has up to an hour. So again, if someone needs an hour beforehand, you could rely on that. Okay. Now, 27. 1 second. Okay.
The offer just
What? Right, obviously. Okay, now. Oh, so this is a very important part over here. Shmiat Shabbat Kilchata, he brings down, let's say, the person working in the kitchen wants to do the work in the kitchen, right, to get ready for the meal. But after that preparation, she wants to go to the shul. She wants to go to her friend. She wants to do something else. Can she do that? Is that considered miyad or not? Is that considered right away? I'm leaving now. I gotta do this now, right? And then I'm gonna go somewhere, and then I'll come back later. This will be ready. Can you do that?
No.
So says Riyavne, no, you can't do that. And you're correct. Okay, he's correct. So we're gonna take a look at Rabbi Ribbiat's Sefer over here. He has an arichus about miyad, and he writes over here as follows. When calculating miyad with respect to the time needed for preparing the meal, remember, Rabbi is under the impression that whatever preparations you need is all calculated in the time, even the non-borer stuff. You can do it as long as you need 2 hours to prepare. You could do borer at the beginning of the 2 hours and then do everything else. But he says it's only the actual preparation. One may not start any earlier to allow for any non-preparational activities. Meaning, I can't start 2 hours in advance because I want the last half hour to go on a stroll or do something else. It has to be that my preparation is leading into the Suda. That's what it is miyad. Now, he holds however long beforehand, but it has to lead to that. For example, a woman requires an hour to prepare the Shabbat Suda. She will not begin an hour and 10 minutes in order to have time to take a walk, rest, or to daven. Can't do that. She has to actually do the borer prior to the Suda. Yes.
Quick question. So if somebody's going to somebody else's house as a guest and they're bringing some salads with them, they cannot prepare in advance, then walk another 20, 30 minutes to their house to bring the salads. So if it's
That's
more
a good
than
question.
that, they requested the salads. Let's say the Balabait said, bring some salads, and they make it right before Shabbat because it's fresh then.
Okay, so I'm going to understand this, that the guy is doing the preparation. He's coming straight to the Suda. He's not taking the walk to do a leisure walk. He's not taking it to rest. He's not going to daven in between. He's preparing it, and he's taking it to where he's eating. I would assume that if it's within the half hour or max of the hour, I would assume that it would be okay. He's not stopping to do something else, so to speak. He needs, as part of his preparation, is taking it to the place where he's eating his meal. I can hear it. Okay. Now, what about unplanned interruptions? The mother is preparing the su'udah, and as it happens, as she's doing borer, right, she's mitzvah peeling eggs for Shabbat meal, and then all of a sudden the kid comes, right? Kids come and need this and need that and need this and need that. Can she take care of the kid, or is that considered the interruption of miyad? I have to prep before my suda. So that I leave the toddler with the dirty diaper because I'm miyad borrowing. What should be?
Part of the
So he says unplanned activities, right? She may return to her chore because miyad is a term by one's intention, says Rabbi Ribbiat. It's your kavana that I'm doing it right before the suda, not by the actual preparation experience. So if my kavana is to do it before the suda and then I get stopped with the little kids to do this, do that, that would be okay. He says not only that, but even more. He says, let's say the woman wants to prepare the suda to be ready at 11:30. So she wants to start at 10:30. But she knows that her baby, right, the infant, is going to nurse at 11, right? The guy's on the clock. The baby's on the clock. He's going to nurse at 11. Can she start at 10:30 in preparations, knowing she's going to have to stop at 11 to feed the child?
He knows already it's going to happen. That's minimum.
So he says she could, because ordinary activities that are typically unavoidable are merely part of the mundane routines of life, and thus considered part and parcel of the preparation time. Meaning that's how I prepare. In the middle of my preparation, I gotta feed the baby. So it's still considered miyad. This is in contrast, this is not like taking a leisure walk, such as reading a book, attending a kiddush, going to shul for davening, as these are distinctive ventures and pursuits, not merely the mundane routines of life. Okay, so that's Rabbi Riviat's distinction of the time, what's considered miyad. As long as my plan is to do it beforehand, right? This is my beforehand, but I have my halach v'yelech of life that I have these interruptions, whether planned or unplanned. The baby comes with a dirty diaper, or I know I'm going to have to feed. All this is still considered miyad. It's not considered an interruption of miyad. What would be considered an interruption of miyad? Where I decide to go on a leisure walk, or I decide to do some sort of activity outside of preparation for the meal. Okay, fine. That is on miyad. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, now, where are we holding? Okay. So Rav Shlomo Zalman, the Shmirat Shabbat Kehilchata, he brings an even bigger extension to the time that you're allowed to do bar. What is considered miyad? He says that, let's say that in order to prepare the meal, let's read over here. If onions must be left in a cooked food for a long time to give it a taste. So the person wants to do bar on the onion, right? And then he wants to put it into the food, but he needs to put it in 4 or 5 hours beforehand in order for it to get the taste. He says this would also be considered immediate. You're talking about 4 or 5 hours now, and it's still considered out because you need this onion to get the taste by sitting in the food. So you're allowed to do that. And he says the same applies here. If for the purpose of the taste, one always prepares the food only 3 or 4 hours prior to the meal, it is permitted, and this is considered kederech achila b'kach. That's considered the way of eating it, and it can stay that long. So he's really pushing it, the limits of what it means, the altar, what it means to do it right away. All right, now here comes the next famous question, which is the guests. Okay?
But Tanya, you're marinating? What is it?
Seems to be you're marinating it in the food. You're putting you're not cooking it or anything. The food's already cooked. You're putting it inside.
Tanya, ability to kind of cooking. Like
No, he's saying you're putting it in there so it gets taste. It puts taste, or to give a good taste. So it's giving a good taste. That's the case here. But we don't, again, we would say up to an hour is our max. We don't have these 4 or 5 hours. This is the way the Ashkenazim or poskim are saying the halacha. All right, now the next one is the Shas Shuva Rav Pa'alim, is the Ben Ish Chai. And this is a case as follows. You know, you're having 3 guests coming, okay? And in order to take out the chicken or whatever it is you have, it's all in a mixture. You have to do borer to take it out and put it on a plate. Now, I know these 3 people, they're not big eaters. Each one's going to eat 1 chicken drum. But it's not respectful to take out 3 chicken drums and put it on a plate and put it on a serving plate. Can I, now miyad means to eat right now. Can I take out many more pieces of chicken, put it on the tray, knowing for sure that they're not going to eat it, but in order to put it for the respect of the guest?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, because you don't know how much the guest gonna eat.
So let's take a look in the Rav Pa'alim, and then let's take a look in the Chazon Devad. Let's take a look. Okay.
That's the problem.
What? No, I have it mixed with other meats, yachni, and the other things. Everything's mixed up together. So I have to take it out of wherever it is, and I have to put it on a plate now. Okay? So I'm allowed to do it if I'm eating it right away. But the question here is, I know these people are not going to eat a lot. I know exactly how much they're going to eat. Okay? Or you can say, I know amount how much they're going to eat, but I don't feel appropriate taking out 4 pieces, 5 pieces. I need to take out a big plate. I have to show that I'm, a good host. Can I do that? So says the Ben Ish Chai in the Rav Pa'alim. He writes, I was uncertain regarding one who sorts an amount needed to fill a bowl in order to serve guests immediately. He knows the guest will not eat everything that he leaves in the bowl, and will certainly leave some. But he sorts enough to fill the bowl out of respect, as it's unbefitting to serve guests unfilled bowls, as this is not in keeping with the etiquette. Is doing borer in such a case permissible or not? So he writes, Misvara, he says, from logic, it is clear to me that there is no problem with borer here. Because this is an immediate need. The it's considered an immediate need for the guests to have a nice plate. So it's considered immediate, and it's considered a true need. Why does this matter? It's also considered a tzarech, and you're allowed to do borer and take out more pieces to make a nice bowl for the guests. Now, the Chazon Avadia in source 16, he writes that I saw what the Rav Palim wrote, that sorting food from waste in order to fill a plate to bring in front of guests is permitted, even though he knows it will not be eaten immediately. And then he says, Olam Harav ben Yishchai lo havi shum raya lidvarav. He didn't bring any raya. V'rak misvara kotav kan. He writes, I said it from my own svara. So he says, he says he should be very careful here. Ein lanu l'chalik v'lahaka b'loy raya b'ruah. V'ein lahater. He says, how could you be makel on an Isser, possibly this is the right there over here, and be makel because of a svara? You have no proof. In our case, there's no proof. And he says, I stand by my position that one may not be lenient. Says Chamabadia. You can't be makel on that. So if you have guests, according to Chamabadia, you got to bring out what you know they're going to eat. You can't take out a full plate. You have to take out what you know they are going to be eating. What are we going to do?
He's more strict in this case, huh? Usually he's lenient.
Yeah, he's saying that he's saying the Ben Ish Chai said beautiful, but the Ben Ish Chai didn't bring any proof. So how can it become to be makel in this malacha?
Good example.
Yeah.
Bring watermelon. At 5 pieces, you bring the whole plate of watermelon.
Because you know you're going to eat it.
Maybe Ben Ish Chai's time it took longer to make this food.
Then what?
Not a problem. There's no borer. It's not borer.
You're not doing bar by watermelon. What do you separate? We're talking about the guy had.
If you're cutting off the green part, only the watermelon part, like that might be a problem. But if you're cutting it with the shell, like most people like to sell with the shell,
With the show.
Okay. Actually, someone, Malkiel, you asked this question earlier. Let's take a look at this. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he introduces an even greater novelty. If one who's about to leave needs to select an item to give to another who will not use the object immediately. Okay, so what's the case? I need to leave, but I need to give somebody else something that they're going to use, but they're not going to use it immediately. But I'm not going to be here anymore. So can I give it to them now? All right, and he says, and you have to do borrow to get this thing. He says selecting is permitted. His reasoning is that in this case, borrowing is the use. All right, this is similar to what the Ben Ish Chai was saying, that the guest is the chila, yeah, and that's the tzarech, and you're allowed to do it. So borrowing is the use, and the act of borrowing is performed immediately. He's borrowing something that requires him to do borrow. Yeah, whatever it is that has to have borrow. So he's borrowing it. The guy is leaving, right? So I'm not going to be there, but he wants to borrow it from me. Can I give it to him now? But he's not going to use it now. He's going to eat it, whatever, 3 hours later. So Shlomo Zalman says, yes, he can do it. He says that's the tzarech. Tzarech is the borrowing, is right now. And then he writes over here that some authorities dispute this claim. Okay, so not everybody will go with this. Perhaps Chamavadi would not go. He says, "Where's the raya in this? Where's the proof that you can do this?" It's a nice svara, but he would say I would refrain from that. Okay, so let us now at this point, for everything that we did, let's review it together, and then maybe we'll have one more story before we end. Take a look at page 314. Okay, take a look at page 314. We start off the basic conditions of Bora. That if one removes the food from the waste by hand and for immediate use, then you circumvent the issue of Bora. And we saw Rashi wrote on the page of the Gemara that this is not considered, it's not the derech of Bora to do it this way, right? We saw the Ramban that said if you do it this way, that means it's now a derech achila, and it's not Bora. So is it not Bora klal like Rashi, or is it becoming derech achila? Maybe they're not arguing. Okay, we talked about that. Immediate use. We saw the Ben Chananel, the Rosh, the Ram, the Ramah, who says sorting for the meal that starts immediately is considered for immediate use. So you can start during the meal, you can do for as long as the meal will be, and even before the meal, we saw that as well. The Ramban, Hagat Mordechai implied the sorting is only permitted immediately, which everyone was bringing down that shah, that hour. The Shulchan Aruch uses the same lashon as the Rambam. Mishnah Berurah showed us that the leniency of the Ramah applies even if the meal lasts for many hours. Rav Moshe said an hour is not the shah. It doesn't mean an actual hour, but rather it means whatever time is needed to prepare for that Suda. Rav Ribiat extended that by saying whatever preparations you need to do for that Suda is all considered the time beforehand, and you can do bar at any point for the time of preparation. Chamuvadia was of the opinion in the half hour, right? Yalkut Yosef said you have up to that hour using the shah as it's defined as a literal shah. Then we saw the idea that it has to be miyad, meaning that I cannot do something else afterwards. I cannot prepare the meal in order to make time that I can play a game or I can go for a walk or whatever it is. It really has to be miyad. Okay. Next, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach wanted to bring that if you need to put an onion for many hours into the food, you have to do a bar issue to get to the onion, and then you have to put the onion inside, and it has to be there for hours. You can do that also. That would also be considered miyad. We wouldn't say that, but that's what Shlomo Zalman Auerbach would say. And then we went to the issue of having the guests, and is it considered okay to take out more than necessary? I know they're not going to eat it. And we had the Ben Ish Chai, and that said yes, and Chacham Ovadia that said no. Okay, so that was our Chazara of what we learned today. B'ezrat Hashem. Next week we will continue our in-depth journey in the Malacha of Bar. And it's the safer, the gray one, the 39. Okay, Rabbi Hanak Mashaman, Tzagalish Baruch Hu Zakot Yisrael. תיק שבת תום מצוות שני אמר, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה וידע. אמן. אמן.